I never thought that the door of that house, where I lived so many happy moments, would be closed in my face with such coldness. When Carla hit her hard, the sound echoed inside me as if it had broken something I still couldn't name. Lucas was behind her, huddled in, his eyes wide, looking to me for some explanation, and my son, Eduardo, standing still, motionless, as if I were some stranger. I stayed a few seconds on the balcony trying to understand what had just happened. The cold wind hit my face and brought me back to reality. I was outside, kicked out of the house I'd helped build, out of the routine I'd carried for years on my back. I bent down to pick up the suitcase that Carla practically threw as I walked down the 3 steps that led to the sidewalk. I noticed my hands shaking. I have never been a woman to fall apart easily, but there are betrayals that break even what seemed unbreakable. The neighbor across the street pretended she didn't see me, and I understood her. No one likes to get involved in the shame of others, and at that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt ashamed to exist. I called a car on my cell phone, trying to maintain my dignity. As I waited, I looked out the window of Lucas's room. The curtain moved, and I swear I saw a little piece of his face trying to find me. I raised my hand to wave, but the curtain was closed abruptly, as if the world itself were saying, "It's over, Tereza." And I felt, in the cruelest way possible, that I was losing him. The car arrived quickly, but the journey seemed endless. I would look out the window and try to understand how my life had turned upside down so suddenly. I remembered the sleepless nights taking care of Lucas, the times when Eduardo called me desperately asking for help, the conversations in which he said that I was irreplaceable, and now I was treated as a burden, a threat, a nuisance. When I arrived at my aunt's house, the feeling of abandonment almost knocked me down. It was a small house, poorly maintained, with the smell of old wood and abandonment. But at that moment, it was all I had left. I opened the windows for the air to enter and felt a pang in my chest when I realized that this would be my new beginning, even though I had no idea how to start over. I spent the first few hours cleaning without thinking. Moving her hands helped to hold back the tears. As I dusted off the furniture, I thought about Lucas, how he was going to cope with my absence. He was the reason for everything, the most alive part of my life. And even though I was exhausted, I knew that this distance would not last forever. Something inside me said that this was not an end, but a stormy interval. As the sun began to set, I sat on the narrow bed in the bedroom and finally let my body weigh down. The silence was so deep that it seemed like another character inside the house, watching me. I was never one to ask anyone for anything, but that night I closed my eyes and asked for an answer, a sign, anything that would show me that Lucas still needed me. Before I went to sleep, I promised myself that I wouldn't beg to come back. Dignity is the only thing no one can take away from us, unless we give it away. I would let Eduardo take his choice, even if it hurt. But if one day Lucas needed it, if something serious happened, I knew I would be called, because he always ran to me, always. And although I didn't know it yet, life was about to confirm that promise in a brutal way. The fall of a family rarely happens quietly, and my downfall was just beginning to make a sound. If you're enjoying the story, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. The following days were strangely slow, as if time had lost the habit of walking without the routine I had with Lucas. I kept waking up early, out of habit, and prepared coffee as if I was about to get his snack. But when I realized that the house was empty, the smell of coffee made my stomach churn. It was like waking up from a dream to enter a worse one. I tried to fill the space with tasks, sweeping, doing laundry, rearranging closets, going through old drawers that my aunt never had the courage to empty. It was curious how her objects seemed to talk to me. Photos, letters, memories of a life that was not mine, but that now welcomed me as a permanent guest. Doing so distracted me, but it didn't silence the hole Lucas had left in me. Sometimes my cell phone vibrated and my heart raced, thinking it was Eduardo, but it wasn't. He seemed to have erased me from his life like someone erasing an old agenda. I tried to be rational, Maybe I was overwhelmed, maybe I was confused, but all attempts to excuse him only deepened the wound. Because in the end, the truth was simple. He chose to keep quiet when I needed it most. Each night, before going to sleep, I relived all the conversations I had with Carla over the years. I realize now how every subtle criticism, every passive-aggressive comment, every unnecessary comparison was a brick in the wall she had erected between me and my son. I was used when convenient and discarded when I stopped being useful. It is hard to admit that the blindness of a child can destroy a mother from within. At the same time, I worried about Lucas. He was always a sensitive, attentive, observant boy. Children sense when something is wrong, and the last thing I saw in his eyes was fear. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was fear. And for some reason I still didn't understand. It haunted me like a silent warning. On the third day, I went to the balcony and watched the street. Children played on bicycles just as Lucas liked. One of them had a way so similar to his that my eyes filled with tears. I thought about calling the school, asking anything, listening to the voice of someone who lived with him. But I was afraid of causing more confusion, afraid of Carla finding out, afraid of hurting Lucas even more. My greatest weapon had always been care, and now it was my greatest prison. While organizing a box with old papers, I found documents from the time when Eduardo was a child. It was impossible not to compare the mother I was with the daughter-in-law I had. I endured humiliations that she would never accept, and as much as it hurt to admit maybe my kindness was my mistake, I let Carla occupy spaces that were never hers. At the end of the afternoon, I sat on the small sofa in the living room and stayed there doing nothing. Sometimes the weight of absence is so great that the body simply stops. It was in that moment of absolute silence that my mind began to recognize a bitter truth. I wasn't just estranged from my grandson. I was being systematically erased from my own family's history. Night came, and I was still lost in thought when I heard an unexpected sound. 3 firm knocks on the front door. My heart raced in a way that hadn't happened since the day Lucas was born. Something inside me, instinct, intuition, maybe destiny, told me that this crash was not ordinary. And I was right, because when I opened the door, my life changed forever. When I opened the door, I saw a man in uniform, tall, firm posture, holding a clipboard to his chest. For a second, I thought it was a mistake, perhaps someone asking for information. But when he pronounced my name with an almost rehearsed calm, I felt my stomach tighten, as if I had been punched. "I'm Sergeant Alves. We need to talk about your grandson." That name, Luke, has never sounded so heavy. I invited him to enter with his body, but my mind screamed for answers. He walked slowly across the room, discreetly observing the simple environment until he sat in my aunt's armchair. I sat in front of him, my hands clasped together, as if trying to stop his own heart from escaping across the table. "Your grandson was involved in a serious incident at school today," he began, his voice deep and paced. The air seemed to disappear from the room. It took me a few seconds to breathe. I wanted to ask what had happened, but I couldn't make a sound. The sergeant continued, as if he knows he's about to break someone inside. "He had a panic attack and said a few things. About you. He asked to see her, repeated her name several times." I felt the tears burn my eyes, not of sadness, but of pure instinct. "Is he hurt? Are you sick? Is he okay?" I asked, stumbling over his words. It was like trying to walk on broken ground. Alves made a gesture to calm me down. "Physically, he's fine, but emotionally, no." That pierced me like an arrow. Lucas, my smiling, shy, sweet boy, what could have caused him so much fear? And why would she call for me if I was, according to Carla, a threat? The sergeant leafed through some papers and paused for a long, heavy pause. "Donna Tereza. His grandson mentioned things that concern us, confusing passages, but enough for us to investigate." He then stared at me directly, as if looking for a truth hidden in my face. "He said that his mother does things with him, and that you know." The phrase was suspended in the air, impossible to ignore. My whole body shuddered. I didn't know exactly what Lucas meant, but I knew that look he had when he was terrified. It was the same look I saw through the curtain a few days ago. I never knew anything, I replied, my voice cracking with fear and indignation, but I've always felt that he walked differently, more silent, more scared. I felt the guilt rise like a hot poison. Alves took a deep breath, as if calculating every word. You were removed from the house recently, correct? I nodded, trying to avoid the embarrassment that insisted on appearing. This coincides with the worsening of his behaviors at school, which leads me to believe that the removal was not a coincidence. He leaned forward, crossing his hands. There may be something you don't know. The silence that settled in seemed alive, pulsating. Your son and daughter-in-law will try to prevent you from having contact with him, the sergeant continued. I've had conversations with his mother and there are inconsistencies. Inconsistencies. The word hit my mind like an alarm. Suddenly, all the little oddities of the past few years began to take shape, a dark mosaic I never wanted to see. We need you, he said firmly. Lucas trusts you, and to protect it, we need to understand what's really going on inside that house. The phrase was like a slap. For days, I had felt useless, discarded, erased. Now, someone told me that I was needed, that Lucas needed me, that perhaps I was the only person capable of saving him. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the wave of emotions that threatened to bring me down. Tell me what I need to do, I replied. And at that moment, without realizing it, I felt the first flame of the woman I would be at the end of this story. A small but living flame, about to become fire. Sergeant Alves remained seated in the armchair while I tried to process everything. He seemed to observe not only my words, but my reactions, my silences, my tremors. It was as if I was mapping the pain I had been carrying for years, a pain that even I didn't fully understand. Donna Teresa, he began, what can you tell me about Lucas's mother? The question sounded too simple for such complexity. I took a deep breath before answering. Carla, she always looked perfect on the outside. Educated, organized, the exemplary wife. I said this almost bitterly, but there was something about her, something I never knew how to explain, a disguised coldness, a mania for controlling everything, like someone holding a secret. When I finished, I realized that my hands were too tight. I let them go slowly. The sergeant took out the clipboard and scribbled down some notes. She tried to convince us that you pose an emotional threat to the boy. I almost laughed, not at humor, but at incredulity. Me? A threat? My chest burned. I took care of him since he was a baby. I bathed, fed, stayed up all night. If there's one person in this world he loves and trusts, it's me. The voice cracked at the end of the sentence. Alves nodded, understanding. I realized that, but his daughter-in-law, she is skilled with words. The sentence made me shudder. I knew it. She always was. He continued. We questioned some of her statements, and some things don't add up. The way he said it, slowly, picking out each syllable, sent a shiver down my spine. It felt like we were treading much deeper ground than I had imagined. She accused the lady of unstable behavior, he said. I closed my eyes for a moment. Unstable? I almost whispered. She took me out of the house on the basis of lies, manipulation, and now she wants to say that I'm crazy. I felt something inside me begin to break, but at the same time something new began to form, a mixture of indignation and strength. The sergeant watched my reaction carefully. My job is to find out what's behind this story, he explained. And for that, I need to know if there is something in the family's past that may be related to the boy's current state. My eyes fixed on him. It was impossible to pretend that this sentence hadn't touched a deep nerve, because there was, yes, a secret, one that I myself tried to forget. I hesitated, but the truth seemed stuck in my throat, asking to leave. There was a situation years ago, involving a family inheritance. My whole body tensed. Strange documents, values that disappeared, signatures that were not right. Eduardo never wanted to listen, and Carla earned more than she should. The sergeant raised his eyebrows attentively. "This is no small thing, Mrs. Tereza," he said. "If there is crime in the past, there may be crime in the present." The idea that Lucas was trapped in such an environment tore me apart. I feel like he was trying to tell me something that last time he saw me. My voice came out weak, almost a whisper, but I didn't know how to understand. The sergeant put the clipboard on his knee and stared at me. "Seriously, you will have another chance. But you need to be prepared. Carla will try to turn everything against you. It has already begun." I felt an intense cold run through my body. It was as if life was warning me that I was at the beginning of a war, a familiar, silent, dangerous war. And for the first time since I was expelled from that house, I realized something. It was no coincidence that I was removed just now. Carla didn't just want to take me out of their lives. She wanted to silence me. And if she needed to silence me, it was because Lucas knew something. Something big, something terrible, something she couldn't allow me to discover. The conversation with the sergeant stirred up memories that I had tried to bury for years. After he left, I sat in the silent room, staring at nothingness, as if the past was about to walk through the door. I knew there was something deeper behind it all, and the more I thought about Luke, the more that ancient secret pulsed inside me. It was as if time was forcing me to revisit pains I was afraid to face. I got up slowly and went to the bedroom, where I left some moving boxes that I never wanted to open. I bent down before them with my heart racing. When I removed the lid of the first one, the smell of stored paper hit me like a ghost. Inside were documents that I'd always feared to revisit. Photos, contracts, letters, everything mixed together as if it didn't belong to anyone. I took the brown envelope that I recognized immediately. It was the same one I received years ago, the day I found out that my late husband's inheritance had simply disappeared into Eduardo's hands. Or rather, in Carla's hands. My fingers trembled as I peeled off the yellowed leaves. My husband's signature was there, but it wasn't his handwriting. I knew it. I always knew. I showed this to Eduardo at the time. He laughed. He said that I was seeing things, that I was too tired, that I needed to accept that he had a new family now. That phrase stuck in my memory like an open wound. I tried to protect him from the truth. I tried to keep the family from tearing itself apart. And, for fear of losing my son, I agreed to remain silent. But now, alone in that cold room, I realized that my silence may have cost me more than I imagined. Perhaps it cost Lucas his safety. Maybe it gave Carla the power she wanted so much. And maybe that power is being used against my grandson in a way that I couldn't yet imagine. Guilt began to strangle me. While flipping through the papers, I found an old letter written by Lucas's father. The handwriting was shaky, but clear enough. He said he didn't trust Carla, who had discovered something about her before he died. Something serious. But the letter stopped in the middle of the sentence, as if it had been interrupted. I never knew that role still existed, and in that instant I felt that I had stumbled upon something dangerous. I kept the letter on my chest by instinct, as if it could escape. A question began to hammer my mind. Did Carla take Lucas away from me to hide the same secret that destroyed his father? The idea was too absurd to say out loud, but inside me it made sense. The same woman who tried to erase me from the map was capable of anything. I sat on the floor, exhausted, holding the envelope. The conversation with Sergeant Alves echoed in my head. He said Lucas mentioned things that Mum does, things he can't tell, things I knew. Did he hear any old conversations? Did he find something? Children perceive more than adults realize. The pain in my chest began to give way to another sensation. Determination. For the first time in a long time, I felt that fear was giving way to a strength I didn't know I still had. I couldn't change the past, but I could prevent the same mistake from destroying my grandson's future. I was tired of blaming myself. Now I wanted to understand. Rescue, confront. I closed the box, stood, and took a deep breath. If Carla hid all this from me and everyone, then she wouldn't stop now. and I needed to be one step ahead. For the first time since I was expelled, I knew exactly what to do: reveal the whole truth, even if it cost me everything. The next morning, I woke up with the feeling that Lucas was calling me, as if his voice echoed inside the house. It was just an impression, I knew, but a grandmother's intuition speaks louder than any evidence. I got up quickly and made coffee, but stopped in the middle of the movement. I remembered that he would not be there to eat with me. That hit me like a dry blow. I decided to call the school, not to talk to Lucas, but to hear their version of the incident. The director answered in a careful, almost rehearsed voice. Dona Teresa, he had a strong crisis. I cried a lot. He said he wanted to leave for the lady's house. My heart squeezed hard. She hesitated before continuing. He also said that Mom did it again, but he didn't explain what it was. My breathing became short. I wanted to ask more, but I felt the principal uncomfortable. Carla had probably already spoken to her. Or worse, the director was afraid of getting involved in something that seemed too delicate. I thanked him, trying not to show despair, and hung up. I stood there, holding the phone as if it was going to explode in my hand. The doorbell rang soon after. When I opened the door, it was Sergeant Alves again. He looked even more serious than on his previous visit. "We need to talk urgently," he said. He entered unceremoniously, as if he knows he is dealing with something big. "We received more reports from the school. Lucas has shown signs of fear and mentioned you as the only person with whom he feels safe." Hearing that was like a hug and a shot at the same time. I felt part of the solution and part of the problem. "What else did he say?" I asked in a barely audible voice. Alves pulled out a small notebook. "He drew something yesterday, a closed room, and a woman holding something that looks like a box or a notebook. He wrote, 'I can't speak.'" My whole body froze. I tried to take a deep breath, but the air seemed trapped in my chest. I began to remember small situations, which I didn't understand before. Lucas was rigid when Carla entered the room, or changed the subject when I asked questions about her mother, or even that lost look he had sometimes, as if he were too far away to be reached. I put it all together in seconds, and the result was terrifying. "There is some chance that she was hurting him?" I asked, feeling my voice crack. Alves hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "We can't say anything yet, but there are indications of deep emotional abuse, and perhaps something beyond that." My heart started beating so fast that I had to sit down. Everything I feared, everything I avoided thinking about, was before me. "We need your help to understand this pattern," he continued. "You lived much more with the boy. He must have noticed changes in behavior." And I realized. Of course I did. He just didn't want to admit it, because admitting meant staring at a monster that I always felt was there, but never had the courage to look you in the eye. The sergeant then put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Lucas asked for this yesterday," he said, handing it to me. When I opened it, my hands trembled. It was a school sheet, scribbled in crooked letters. "Grandma, help me." That destroyed everything that was left of hesitation in me. That boy was asking for help, clearly, desperately. I took a deep breath and looked up at the sergeant. "Tell me what I need to do," I repeated firmly. But this time, it wasn't despair. It was decision. I was no longer the expelled grandmother, the discarded woman. I was about to become the only barrier standing between Lucas and a danger that had not yet been named. And whatever happened, I wasn't going to fail. After that note from Lucas, I couldn't sleep properly anymore. I closed my eyes and saw those crooked letters asking for help. At the same time, he knew that any misstep could make everything worse. Carla was not only spiteful, she was strategist, cold, calculating. And I knew that if I felt like I was losing control, I was going to react. Sergeant Alves suggested that I not make direct contact with her yet. "She has already started to paint the lady as unstable," he warned me. "If she reacts with emotion, it will only confirm her narrative." That phrase kept hammering in my head the rest of the day. How difficult it is to be calm when you have a grandchild in danger. In the late afternoon, the phone rang. When I saw Eduardo's name on the screen, my hands got cold. I answered with a thread of voice, trying not to show anxiety. "Hi, Mum," he said, dry, distant. You could already feel, just by the tone, that there was poison behind that call. "Carla told me that you've been getting into Lucas's school," he began. My breath immediately stopped. I hadn't said anything to her, and yet she already knew. It was like dealing with someone who saw one step ahead of everyone. "You promised to respect our space, Mom. Why is it making it difficult?" For a moment I thought about saying everything, the police call, the note, the fear, but Alva's voice echoed in my head, urging caution. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "Eduardo, I'm not getting involved. I'm only worried about your son." On the other side, I heard a short, bitter laugh. "History is heating up. If you haven't signed up yet, take advantage now and click on the subscribe button to continue following this turnaround." "Our son, Mother, not yours," he corrected coldly. His every word felt like a knife being pushed slowly. "Carla is emotionally exhausted, and you still put her as a villain." Albeit it was impressive, the ability she had to play the victim. I could almost see her face, tearful, manipulating every sentence. He continued mercilessly, "She is seriously considering asking for her interdiction." For a moment, I thought I had heard wrong. "What's it like?" I asked, my voice cracking out of control. "You're getting confused, forgetful, unstable. It's dangerous to be around Lucas." The accusation came as a death sentence. I got up from my chair without realizing it, as if the body was trying to get away from it. "Eduardo, for God's sake, you know me," I said, almost pleading. "I raised you. I did everything for you. I never put anyone at risk." On the other side, his silence hurt more than any words. It was as if I was talking to a stranger using my son's voice. "Carla just wants to protect her family," he concluded. "If you keep insisting, we can get a lawyer involved." The call ended without goodbye, leaving a heavy echo in the room. I stood with the phone in my hand, shaking from head to toe. At that moment, I understood it wasn't just Lucas who was at risk. Me too. I sat down again, breathing slowly, trying not to fall apart. Carla was laying a perfect siege. Me, the crazy and dangerous grandmother. If I reacted angrily, she would win. If I kept quiet, she would win. I needed to find a way to fight without playing her game. And that was when Sergeant Alves became even more important in my life. The next morning, I asked Sergeant Alves to return to my house. I needed to tell him about Eduardo's call, about the threat of interdiction. When he arrived, he had that mixture of tiredness and firmness in his eyes. He looked like someone who had seen the worst of human beings many times, but he still chose to be on the right side. We sat at the kitchen table, with 2 cups of coffee between us. I told him everything, without hiding anything, from the inheritance to Eduardo's call. He listened in silence, just shaking his head from time to time. When I finished, I felt like I had lifted a weight of years off my back. But at the same time, I felt vulnerable, exposed, almost naked. "It's serious," he said after a few seconds. "If she is talking about interdiction, it is because she knows that you are a problem." He paused, resting his elbows on the table. "And when a manipulator sees someone as a problem, she tries to eliminate." I swallowed hard. It was hard to hear the truth so raw. "But it also works in our favor," he added. I looked at him, not understanding. "The more she exaggerates, the more she shows the fear she has of you." He opened the folder he had and spread some reports on the table. "We've already found some things in her finances." There were statements, records, strange bank movements. High payments on behalf of lawyers, suspicious transfers. And one detail caught my attention, a large withdrawal made at the time of inheritance. My heart raced, recognizing that value. It was the amount that disappeared without explanation years ago. "Carla is involved in at least 2 nebulous situations," Alves explained. "One linked to the family's money, another possibly linked to Lucas's emotional." He looked at me with absolute seriousness. "It is not only difficult, it is dangerous." It was strange, but at that moment I felt something like relief. I wasn't crazy. "And what do I do now?" I asked, trying not to let panic dominate. He took a deep breath, like someone who sets up a strategy in his head. Now you need to be smart. No direct confrontations. He took a piece of paper and started writing something on it. I will appoint a trusted lawyer. You will not face this alone. When he said this sentence, something inside me broke and recomposed itself at the same time. I spent so many years believing that I needed to endure everything in silence. To be strong meant to swallow, to accept, to endure. Now, I was beginning to understand that being strong is also asking for help and allow someone to fight alongside us. Alves continued, I will also record, officially, that Lucas asked you for help. This shows that he sees her as a figure of protection, not a threat. He smiled slightly, for the first time since I met him. They won't be able to paint you as a monster so easily. I felt, for the first time in a long time, a thread of hope. When he left, I was alone again in the kitchen, but the loneliness felt different now, less dark, less suffocating. I had an ally, a professional, someone who believed in me, and more than that, someone willing to face Carla with the truth. That day, I realized that I was no longer the poor one expelled. I was part of the resistance. And although the fear was still there, insistent, something new was born within me, a kind of silent courage which made no noise but took up space. I knew that there was still a storm ahead, perhaps the worst of all, but for the first time since it all began, I felt prepared to face it, not for me alone, but for the boy who wrote, Grandma, help me. After Sergeant Alves left, I felt an uneasiness drag me to the guest room, the same one where I had left old boxes from my life. Something told me that the answer I was looking for was not just in what was happening now, but in what I missed years ago. It was as if the past knocked on the door along with the present, demanding to be heard, and for the first time, I was willing to listen. I opened the heaviest box and almost gave up when I saw the amount of papers. Old contracts, paid bills, letters from my husband, drafts of projects he never finished, all mixed together as pieces of a life that I tried to keep but never relived. I sat on the floor and started sorting item by item, almost mechanically, until I found something that shouldn't be there. It was a small notebook with a brown cover, tied with a worn elastic band. As soon as I touched him, I felt a twinge in my chest. I knew what it was. My husband's diary, the one that everyone said was gone. He wrote there when he was worried, when he needed to think without speaking. And if the diary was with me now, hidden at the bottom of a box, it was because someone wanted me not to find this notebook before. I opened the front page with trembling hands. His lyrics, neat and firm, jumped to my eyes like a painful memory. He talked about work, about Eduardo as a child, about small day-to-day concerns. But as I flipped through, the tone began to change. The sentences became tense, short, as if he was fighting something he didn't want to admit to himself. It was near the end that I found what I feared. Carla is not who she says she is. My heart pounded. I found strange documents, unexplained expenses. Eduardo trusts her too much. I'm afraid of what this could mean for our family. I closed the journal for a moment, trying to process what I had just read. My husband was suspicious of her before I even realized anything. And somehow, this diary was taken out of circulation. Eduardo swore that he no longer existed. Carla said that I was making up memories. The truth was that someone had made a point of hiding this notebook, and now I understood why. I continued reading, even with a heavy heart. On the last page, he wrote an incomplete sentence. If something happens to me, look for the... Someone ripped the sequel out. My breath failed. Someone messed with this diary. Someone wanted to delete the notice. And the only person with access to everything, at the time, was Carla. I felt a mixture of horror and relief at the same time. Relief because there was finally concrete proof that I wasn't crazy. Horror because if she was able to manipulate even documents of a dead man, what else would he be able to do with a helpless boy? I got up from the floor with the diary in my hands, feeling that I was carrying dynamite. It was the missing piece. the beginning of her downfall. I kept the notebook in a safe place, inside a lockable drawer. The past and present were now connected. Carla didn't just hate me, she wanted to erase any trace that might compromise her power over Eduardo. When I closed the drawer, I felt a new strength ignite inside me. I was no longer just a desperate grandmother. I had proof, I had direction, and for the first time I had a gun that she didn't know existed. It was time to start turning the tide. That night, I lay in bed, but I couldn't close my eyes. My husband's diary, the notice he tried to leave for me, burned in my mind. It was impossible not to think about what might have happened if I had found it earlier. Perhaps Eduardo had not moved so far. Perhaps Luke was safe now. But I could no longer afford to live by what-ifs. I finally had something that could change everything, and I needed to act smart. The sergeant's words echoed within me. No direct confrontations. He was right. Carla was dangerous, and reacting impulsively would be suicide. I needed to be strategic. It needs to be the woman she never believed me to be. I got out of bed at dawn and went to the kitchen. I brewed strong coffee, the kind I made when I needed to clear my head. As I stirred the spoon inside the cup, I noticed that my hands were steady. It was strange. After so many days of shaking, I finally felt solid, as if something inside me had changed. As I drank the coffee, I began to think of Lucas. That note from school asking for help was now my compass. I knew I couldn't let him down, not now. He trusted me in the most fragile moment of his life. I started to put together a plan mentally. First, give the diary to Sergeant Alves, then talk to the lawyer he recommended, and finally, prepare for the confrontation that would come, the confrontation that I knew would be inevitable. It wouldn't just be about Carla. It would be about putting light where she spread shadow. When the sun finally came out the window, I found myself standing firmly. Tired, yes. Hurt, yes. But different. I was not the same woman who had been kicked out of that house days ago. Pain had turned into purpose. Later, I received an unexpected message from the school. One employee, who had always liked me, wrote discreetly, "He asked for you today." I almost cried reading that. Lucas was missing me, and that gave me more strength than any coffee could give. I spent the rest of the morning organizing the documents, every paper, every piece of evidence, every detail that could dismantle Carla. Use lies he didn't know when, but he knew that soon the truth would have to be told in front of everyone. And the day that happened, I needed to be ready, because she was used to seeing me as fragile, and that was precisely what favored me. Before the end of the day, I took a deep breath and looked at the drawer where the diary was kept. That wasn't just a notebook. It was a key that opened the door that Carla had tried to lock for years, a key that could save Lucas and free Eduardo from the web in which he was trapped. And I knew, from that moment on, my fight was no longer defensive. Now it was my turn to move forward. The next day, I woke up to an unexpected message from Eduardo. He wanted to talk in person, but the tone was cold, almost hostile. My heart raced because I knew it wasn't from him. It came from her. Carla has always used my son's voice as a shield, as a weapon, as bait. And now, with the siege starting to tighten, she was probably desperate. Even so, I accepted. I needed to see with my own eyes what was happening. When I got close to their house, I noticed that the curtains were closed. The door opened only slightly, revealing Carla with deep, dark circles. She seemed nervous, restless, threatened, like a cornered animal. And it was at that moment that I realized she was afraid. From me. "Come in," she said, without looking me in the eye, as if she had to say. The room was messy, toys out of place, empty bottles in the sink. I had never seen that house like this. Carla was obsessed with control, and when controlling people lose control, chaos appears around every corner. Lucas was nowhere in sight, which increased my concern. Eduardo emerged from the hallway, pale and tense. "Can we talk outside?" he said, avoiding staring at me. We went out into the backyard, where the cold wind cut the air between us. Carla is very shaken, he began, repeating her speech. She thinks you're trying to destroy our family. I felt an impulse to laugh, not humor, but incredulity. Eduardo, his wife is hiding something very serious. He frowned defensively, already anticipating the woman's position. She told me that you made up this story to look like a victim. It hurt me in a way I couldn't hide. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I found documents, Eduardo. Your father's stuff, things she hid. He widened his eyes for a moment, just an instant, before disguising himself. She said you were going to try this. He said he was going to mess with the past, to divide us. That sentence was the proof I needed. Carla was losing narrative control. And Lucas? I asked firmly. Why did he ask for help? Why do you draw fear? Eduardo became rigid, as if he was not ready to face that reality. Before he answered, Carla appeared at the door shouting, Eduardo, now! The tone was not that of a wife. It was that of someone bossing the prisoner around. He obeyed immediately, as always, without looking back. When I returned home, I felt my hands shaking again. But this time it wasn't out of weakness. It was for sure. Carla was on the verge of a breakdown, and people like that become dangerous. I needed to act fast, not just for me, but for Lucas. It was clear. Her castle of lies was beginning to crumble. What I didn't know yet was how far she would go to stop it. But Sergeant Alves knew, and I was about to find out too. That night was long. I could barely rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lucas calling me, asking for help. And I saw Carla, dark, holding something invisible that I couldn't identify. I knew I was close to a discovery, but also close to real danger, and this feeling accompanied me until the next morning. In the early afternoon, Sergeant Alves showed up unannounced. We need to talk urgently, he said, entering quickly. He looked more serious than ever, as if he had seen something serious. He sat down at the table and placed a small portable tape recorder between us. We achieved this yesterday, and you need to listen. My heart started beating so hard that it seemed to echo in the kitchen. He pressed play, and Carla's voice filled the room. It wasn't the sweet, polite voice she used with strangers. She was another, cold, calculating, poisonous. Eduardo will never leave me as long as that old woman exists. My blood ran cold. It ruins everything, it always has. She wants to take everything away from me, even my son. The recording continued, revealing layers of hatred that I didn't know existed. I'm going to finish her off, one way or another. The interdiction is just the beginning. My breath was held when I heard the next sentence. And Lucas, what are you going to do with it? A male voice asked. He talks too much. Good thing you're afraid. A child with fear obeys. I felt my stomach turn. The room spun for a moment. That was the signal that was missing. The proof I dreaded to hear, but needed. Carla used fear as a weapon, even against his own son. When the recording ended, I was in shock. This conversation was recorded in a restaurant. A witness handed it to us, Alves explained. Carla is more involved in crimes than we imagine. I was still trying to catch my breath when he put another document on the table. And there's more. She tried to transfer a large amount yesterday to another state. I got the message immediately. Carla was getting ready to run away. My heart started beating fast, a mixture of panic and fury. She can't take my grandson. You can't, I said, feeling my voice crack. Alves looked into my eyes firmly. That's why we're acting now. He leaned over the table and took my hands, respectfully but urgently. Mrs. Tereza, what you are about to do requires courage, but I can assure you, this recording changes everything. The truth is on our side. I felt the tears flowing, warm but not of sadness. It is of relief, of justice, of strength being reborn within me. I, who had been expelled, humiliated, erased, now had in my hands the weapon that Carla never imagined I would find. The war was about to begin. But at last I was not entering it alone. I had the truth. He had allies. He had proof. And above all, there was Lucas. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to stop me from fighting for him. In the following days, everything happened faster than I expected. The lawyer appointed by Sergeant Alves called me even before sunrise. "Get ready, Donna Teresa. Today we are going to ask for urgent measures." My breath was short, but my hands, curiously, were steady. I knew this moment would come, and now it was here. When we arrived at the forum, I felt my legs tremble. The building seemed huge, cold, impersonal, as if it swallowed me. But the lawyer walked by my side with a sure, almost protective step. "Trust me," she said, placing the briefcase against her chest. "Today is the day when the truth begins to come out." The courtroom was full of people: social worker, school principal, 2 police officers, and even the prosecutor. And then she entered. Carla.com, that rehearsed air of victimhood, impeccable makeup, dramatic posture, as if the whole world was unfair to her. Eduardo came right behind, looking like a man without a soul, pale, confused, torn between 2 versions of reality. When our eyes met, I felt a deep, almost physical twinge. It wasn't anger, it was grief. I mourned for the son I had lost to a lie. The judge started the session, and Carla took the floor even before she was authorized. "Your Honor, this woman is dangerous. She persecutes our family. She's unstable." It was amazing how she lied so naturally. But I've learned that manipulators don't stumble. They dance in chaos. And Carla was dancing too confidently. It was then that the lawyer made a discreet sign to Sergeant Alves. He got up, walked to the center of the room, and turned on the recorder. Carla's voice exploded in the room like a punch. "I'm going to finish her off, one way or another." The whole room was petrified. Eduardo became white as paper. The school principal put her hand to her mouth, shocked. Carla tried to interrupt, but the lawyer asked for silence. When the recording got to the phrase about Lucas, "A child with fear obeys," I felt a lump in my throat. No one, absolutely no one, could pretend that it was misinterpreted. The judge hit the gavel on the table. "Comes. This is extremely serious." Carla began to tremble, lose control, contradict herself. For the first time, her mask cracked in front of everyone. And at that moment, I realized her strength was never real. It was built on fear. I sat silently, watching. It was like watching years of humiliation being dismantled, piece by piece. The truth, finally, was no longer whispering. It was screaming. And for the first time, I was not the accused. I was the witness who survived. After the hearing, we were all summoned to a smaller room. Carla was unrecognizable, nervous, trembling, trying to reach Eduardo. It was as if he had seen for the first time who the woman he lived with was. I felt no joy for that. I felt sorry. Too bad for the lost years. The social worker asked to speak to me separately. "Lucas trusts you deeply," she said, her voice soft, "and that's very important right now. He is emotionally fragile." My heart tightened, wondering what my grandson had gone through alone. "When can I see him?" I asked, almost breathless. Before she answered, a police officer entered the room. We found items in the child's room that corroborate the recording. Carla lost her breath. Eduardo almost fell sitting down. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. Carla started screaming, denying, accusing everyone around. "This is a setup. This is persecution. She did this to me." She pointed at me as if I were a monster, but no one believed in her anymore. The veil had fallen, and a person without masks is just what it is, raw truth. The judge authorized an emergency measure. Carla temporarily lost custody of Lucas, and I was allowed to see my grandson later that day. When we left the courthouse, the wind seemed different, lighter. Sergeant Alves walked beside me, but this time not on alert. "Today you saved a child," he said, without exaggeration. I felt my legs soften, but with relief. I, who was called crazy, unstable, outdated, had won. Before leaving, Eduardo approached. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. His eyes watered, perhaps for the first time in years. I didn't know," he said, almost whispering. And I believed it. But I haven't forgotten. I couldn't forget. Carla, escorted by the police, gave me a look that I will never forget. It wasn't anger. It was fear. Fear of me, fear of the truth, fear of what she could no longer control. And for the first time since the beginning of that storm, I felt something new born inside me, freedom. The truth had finally come out of the darkness, and there was no turning back. Now, all that was left was to find him, my Lucas, my heart. When I arrived at the reserved social assistance room, my hands were cold. I knew Lucas was inside, waiting, but I also knew that this reunion would not erase the pain he carried. I took a deep breath, adjusted my clothes, and pushed the door down slowly. And then I saw him, small, huddled together, holding an old doll. As soon as our eyes met, he ran to me without thinking. He threw himself into my arms as if he had found air after being submerged. I hugged him with all the strength I had, feeling every sob of his in my chest. "Grandma, I knew you were coming," he said, crying softly. And in that instant, everything made sense. Every fight, every pain, every humiliation. We sat on the couch for a while, just the two of us, in silence. The social worker watched us from a distance, respectful. Lucas wouldn't let go of my hand even for a second. He looked like a child who had finally found shelter after a storm. I wanted to protect him from everything, even his own past. After a few minutes, he raised his face and whispered, "Mommy said you didn't like me anymore." I closed my eyes for a moment, holding back the pain. "My love, I never stopped liking you. Never. Not for a second." He nodded slowly, still wary of the world around him. It was clear that his emotional confusion was going to take time to heal, and I was ready. I was going to be present at every step of this healing, because now no one was going to stop me. In the following days, Lucas came under my care. My aunt's house was filled with life again, toys, drawings, short laughs. But even with flashes of joy, there were still shadows. Sometimes he would wake up at night, crying, saying that something bad was going to come back. I hugged him and said, with absolute truth, that nothing else was going to hurt him. Eduardo came to visit me a week later, alone, dejected. When he opened the door, he looked like a man who had finally woken up. He apologized, cried, he begged for forgiveness. I listened silently, letting every word fall where it needed to fall. And then I replied calmly, "I forgive, but nothing is ever the same again." It was hard to say that, but it was true. I needed to protect Lucas, and I also needed to protect myself. Broken trust is like glass. You can put the pieces together, but the marks remain. Eduardo understood. For the first time, he didn't argue, he didn't contradict, he just accepted. Carla, on the other hand, remained in prison while awaiting trial. And even without being close, his presence still hovered in the lives of all of us, not as a threat, but as a reminder, a bitter memory which served to reinforce who I never wanted to be again, nor let anyone go with me again. Over time, I began to rebuild my life. Nothing extraordinary, just things I had lost sight of. I sewed new curtains, painted the kitchen, planted flowers in the garden. I discovered that I could do small jobs for neighbors, earn my own money, and for the first time, I felt proud of myself, not as a mother or grandmother, but as a woman. Lucas smiled again little by little, and in each smile there was a piece of me too, reborn. I learned that love is not just care, it is courage, it is confrontation, it is persistence. I entered this story as someone fragile, discarded, erased, and I came out of it as someone that life itself could not bring down. Today, as I watch Lucas drawing on the living room table, I feel a mixture of peace and strength. The storm passed, but it left its mark, and I learned to live with them. There is no perfect ending, no perfect family, no instant healing, but there is reconstruction, there is dignity, there is a new beginning, and above all, there is the certainty that I will never be the same woman again. I am Tereza, you survived. And for the first time in many years, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to, a star.com, who I'm supposed to be, and being who I should have been from the beginning, myself. And now, I want to know from you, what did you think of Tereza's journey? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to reinvent yourself or face someone who seemed to have all the power? Tell us here in the comments. I really want to read your experience. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like to support stories like this.